Sup, students? Welcome to With You, where we seek to grow deeper in our relationship together with God, because even when we're not with you, we're with you. I'm your host, Phoebe, and because today is Thursday, we are joined by a special guest, Haley Downey, which we're so excited about. This week, we've been talking through Jesus' baptism, which we read in Matthew chapter 3, verses 13 to 17, and it's all about how we are his and how only Jesus could make that happen, that only Jesus could forgive us. And I'm really excited for Haley Downey to be joining us today. You guys know her pretty well, I'm sure. She's the middle school youth pastor here at Arbor Road, and she's a dear friend of mine. But something you might not know about Haley that I hope we'll get Haley back on this podcast, because she's currently in the process of auditioning for a game show. So rooting her on from afar, all of us, and hoping she'll make it, because that'd be pretty epic for us to talk with her about what that has been like. So Haley, thank you so much for joining us today. I think we're in the presence of greatness.
Oh, stop. It's so good to be here. And yes, that is true. But stay tuned. Fingers crossed that we actually make it. So.
Yes, we're cheering for you. Well, I am so excited for Haley to be the one who's speaking to you guys today. And first, because she's become a dear friend of mine. And second, because she has been running after Jesus. She's been running after seeking truth and hope, and she's found it in Jesus Christ. And it's really cool. Haley's going to hit on something today that we briefly mentioned on Wednesday. So if you've listened to the podcast on Wednesday, we talked a little bit about Jesus's humanity and divinity. Haley, would you dive a little bit deeper into that for us?
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. The thing that stuck out to me the most when I was reading through this passage in Matthew is the concept of Jesus getting baptized. Obviously, that's like mind-blowing, and you guys have kind of gone through that this week, but just the human nature of him to be baptized just feels funny to think about. But then it also reminds me, like you said, of just the humanness, but also the fact that he's still divine. He's a God who came down as Jesus, and he knows how to relate to us. He knows how to empathize with us. He walked in the same things that we've walked. And so baptism is such a clear example of the fact that he was like us in that moment. And something that's been really cool and that I've been realizing in my quiet time and almost thanking God for is how generous that God is to give us someone like Jesus who can empathize with us and understand where we're at. And personally for me in my walk with Jesus, something that he's been challenging me with is this concept of embracing my reality, embracing the reality of where God has me right now, but also how it's so easy to be consumed with what I want to be different. And I think there's a lot of us even listening that there's things in our life that we wish were different. We wish friend group and friend drama wasn't existent. We wish our schools were back in normal time. We wish a lot of different things. And when I think about Jesus as being someone who was fully human, but also fully divine, he was human, I think of the fact that he learned and he knew how to embrace his reality so well. I mean, you think of the story of Jesus. I mean, even right before he was about to go on the cross, he was having dinner with all his friends. And you can imagine just knowing what his life was going to look like in a few hours, right? And he was probably anticipating just a lot going on, and his reality was brutal in that moment. And he actually had this intimate moment with God where he was able to say, like, God, take this cup from me. If it's your will, would you make this go away? And obviously we know what ended up happening and the victory that Jesus had and dying for our sins and raising from the grave and how beautiful that was. But I just love that God is so generous to give us Jesus, to give us example of what embracing what is can look like. And so that's just been something I've been really marinating on. And I love that the baptism of Jesus can really show us that. And there's a lot of moments in my prayer and in my time with God, and maybe you guys have had this happen before, where you've been telling God, like, you don't understand how hard it is, God. You don't understand my situation, my family. And one, he does, he's God. But two, he's actually experienced similar things that we've experienced. He's experienced the betrayal of friends. He's experienced being alone when maybe he didn't want to be alone. And that was just like kind of his reality. And so that's just been something I've really been taking away, Phoebe, is just that concept of the humanness of Jesus and him coming down and God wanting to be with us through Jesus. So I just think that's really beautiful. And I've learned how to embrace my reality and how to be where I'm supposed to be, because it's where God has me, because Jesus is my example of that.
How cool that we get to serve a God, that we get to be known by a God who is so close. I think that's really a reminder this morning for me, is that our God is a God who came down as human, and he was fully God. And so he was capable of rising from the dead, but he was also capable of dying. He was capable of taking on that punishment. And so thank you, Haley, for that reminder that he is close, that he is near, and that he knows us, and he knows everything that it means to be human. He knows everything that it means to be a teenager, because he was one at one point. So
wild,
really cool, really crazy to think about. He was a 16-year-old at one point, Jesus Christ. So a really cool reminder that we are his, and only Jesus could have made that happen. Next week, we'll be talking through Matthew still, and it's actually right after this story of Jesus' baptism. We'll be talking about Jesus' temptation in the wilderness, which is, again, a declaration of how Jesus is fully human. He is tempted, but he's fully divine. He doesn't give into the temptation. So I'm excited to dive into that next week with you guys. Haley, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure and an honor, and hopefully we'll get her back on the podcast soon. Remember, let's be real together before God and with one another as long as it's called today. It was great to be with you. Take care.